Well, welcome back, folks. Today we're going to talk about the rebuilding of carburetors, and more specifically we're going to talk about the parts used to rebuild these vintage carburetors that we find on our favorite motorcycles. In the shot right now you see the carburetors disassembled from the Yamaha YL1 project, and I'm not going to talk in detail about necessarily these particular carburetors today. I'm in the process of shooting the rebuild series of videos for rebuilding these carburetors, and in fact when I'm done with this video I'm going to continue to shoot the second of the two videos in the series of rebuilding the Yamaha carburetors. They're here just rather as visual props and aids for this conversation rather than getting into detail the Yamaha carburetors. But let's talk about rebuilding of vintage carburetors, whether it's Mikuni, which are the most probably common on Yamaha, Kawasaki, and Suzuki motorcycles. Keihin, used almost exclusively on Honda. Honda owns part of Keihin, by the way. I didn't know if people knew that. That's probably why Honda always uses Keihin. And there's actually a third, excuse me, a third brand of Japanese carburetors that are used relatively infrequently, and that's TK. And I have encountered TKs a couple of times in my life, my process of working on these old carbs. I think Kawasaki and Yamaha has used TK a couple of times. I don't know if I've ever encountered them on Suzuki's. But moving along, these are Mikuni carburetors, and when I rebuild carburetors, I virtually never use all the parts out of the commonly available kits, carburetor kits you can buy on eBay, and they're all over online. This is an example right here. It's left over from an old project. This happens to be from a Honda CB7 350 that I rebuilt probably 15 years ago. I had both a CB and a CL 350 I bought from the same party. I had to recondition both of them, and I eventually sold them on eBay, and they, I believe, went to the country of France. They were exported. Nonetheless, this was one of the kits I had bought. I had two of these for each of the motorcycles. This is left over. And I just covered up the brand just to protect the innocent. I'm not here to disparage brands of kits. Rather talk in more general terms about why I don't typically use most of the parts that come in these kits. And in fact, I won't open this up because there's the plastic sleeve that the parts are in has the name of this branded kit all over it. I don't want to reveal that, but you can hear in there all the jets and everything that came with this kit are still there. The only thing I used out of this kit, if memory serves, and looking at the kit inside, what's left was the gaskets and O-rings. And that's about all I use these kits for, is gaskets and O-rings. They are an inexpensive source, usually, of gaskets and O-rings, carburetor float bowl gaskets and O-rings and that kind of thing. They're usually quite a bit less expensive than buying OEM parts, and they seem to work okay. However, when it comes to things like jets, I virtually never use those out of these kits. Most of the time, in my experience, the jets. Now, when I talk about jets, I'm talking about things like the main jet, which you see right here at the top of this this Yamaha carburetor. That's the main jet right here that threads in that little small part. Then you have the jet body right here that this threads into. We have the pilot jet, which you'll be hearing a lot more and seeing a lot more about as I work on the YL1 carbs. It's a pilot jet. And we have the air screw right here. And of course, we have the needle valve assembly, or the fuel valve. These are the parts I'm really talking about when I talk about jets. In most cases, and I would even wager the vast majority of the cases, your jets can be reused. They can, because they're brass, they're almost always brass, and unless they have been damaged during removal, such as a pilot jet, in fact this one that I'm showing right now actually was severely damaged in removal, and again, you'll see me talking about this in a future video, unless they have been damaged during removal or they are so corroded that they are not really usable anymore, which again in my experience is pretty unusual except for pilot jet damage, these parts can be cleaned and reused. In fact, all of these jets for this Yamaha, except for this one pilot jet, are going to be cleaned and reused, and you can see I've already started the cleaning process. There's no need to buy a kit to go and get new jets in most cases. If I need to replace jets, these kind of components here, I almost always go back and buy new OEM parts, such as Mikuni. They are still available. They're not always available from Yamaha or Kawasaki or Suzuki or Honda. Many times they are, and when they are, they're quite expensive. I admit that. You will pay a lot more money for original Mikuni jets. But I found that the quality is much better. I've had trouble over the years with trying to get third-party jets to settle in well and the engine to run well and the carburetor adjust easily and settle in place. I find when I use OEM jets such as Mikuni brand or Keihin that my life is a lot better, a lot smoother when fiddling around with these carburetors. So I buy new OEM parts if at all possible. Now the supplier, the original supplier such as Yamaha, may not still support all their parts. And in fact, on this set of carburetors right here, the needle valve is still available from Yamaha and the gasket. They're very expensive. That's over $24, and the gasket is around $250. This main jet nozzle right here, this body, is not available. The main jet itself is not available. The air screw and spring, the air screw itself is available, but the spring is not. That air screw is $16+. The pilot jet is no longer available. However, I can buy all of these parts, original Mikuni, from a number of suppliers, as well as they're all over eBay, for usually, almost always, quite a bit less money than you would pay if you went through a Yamaha, Kawasaki, Suzuki, or Honda dealer. Almost always. Not always, but usually. So I source new replacement jets in similar components, usually from eBay, online. I usually don't go back to the OEM such as Yamaha or the other three big Japanese bike manufacturers because they're so expensive. So you can still buy most of these parts, Mikuni brand, online and other places if you just do a little searching, and usually for less money. That brings me to my second point around why I don't use kits, and that is inconsistencies of sizes. And what I mean by that is you have to be careful when you buy these generic kits, even though it might be for CB350. Be aware that the manufacturers occasionally change jets during model year runs. And from one year to another, the jet sizing might have changed, even though the jet might be the same type of jet, but the sizing of the jet itself might be different. In fact, it's pretty common in my experience. And that's occasionally what you'll run into with these kits is the jets that you'll get in the kit, though might fit some of the CB350 models, the jets might not be the right size for your particular model year. And so not only do I have the issue of getting the jets to always work well, i.e. the quality, they might not be the right size at all for your particular model year project. What I find happens then is I end up with a whole bunch of parts in these kits that I really don't need, that are left over there of no use to me whatsoever. Now what I do use the kits for, and I alluded to this when we started, is things like gaskets. So this float bowl gasket, for instance, I believe, I didn't look this one up particularly, specifically, rather. I believe this might still be available from Yamaha and I think it was like $9 or $10. Well, I can buy probably 2 kits, certainly 1 kit, if not 2 whole kits, for less than the price of just this gasket. And the gaskets, in my experience, work just fine along with the O-rings that come in a kit. So if I buy a kit, it would usually only be for the O-rings and gaskets, the brass components, the float valve, needle valve, and the jets I simply don't use. I'll go source an OEM, Mikuni, or Keihin equivalent, or the appropriate part. Let's talk a little bit about these float bowl screws, and that's what these are right here. And there's obviously 4 of them that go hold the float bowl onto the carburetor body. These are the originals. I am going to replace these. These from Yamaha right now, the screw itself is no longer available. The washer is. However, they come as separate pieces, where these are, today they come as separate pieces. These are one-piece assemblies, that is, the washer is on there permanently. And you can find them on eBay under the original Yamaha part number, but people want a fortune for them. So as an alternative, I went and did a little searching, and this is a screw off a Kawasaki S1 Triple. I have one of those bikes. And it is the exact same, it's Mikuni carburetors, about almost the same size as the YL1 carburetors. And I don't know if you can see there, but they are identical screws. The one on the right is off the S1. The one on the left is the YL1. They are the same exact screw. So what I'm going to do, and by the way, the Kawasaki screw is still available, and they're like 70 cents a piece, 70 US cents a piece. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to go and order 8 new Kawasaki S1 screws, probably through Partzilla, and they are identical to the Yamaha screws because they are all Mikuni carburetors. And replace the screws using a Kawasaki, under a Kawasaki part number. Mikuni supplied, I'm sure. And you can do similar things with other components on these carburetors, depending on your specific needs. So this conversation was really around jetting and parts, and why I don't use all the parts, in fact most of the parts out of kits. If I can source reasonably priced original OEM parts, even gaskets, I will do so. If I do buy a kit, it will usually be just for the gaskets and O-rings if necessary. Now I realize your perspective might vary, your experiences might be different. You might have had great luck using these boxed kits. I'm not trying to take away or disparage again these kits. They do have their place. I do use them, as I've shared with some of the parts, but I find most of the parts I don't use because I'm not happy with them, and end up accumulating a bunch of parts like you hear in here that I just don't need. I would be curious in other people's perspectives and experiences using kits and rebuilding these carburetors, so feel free to drop comments regarding that. Again, I realize your experience might be totally different than mine, and I'd be interested in hearing about that. That's it for this video today, folks. Any questions or comments, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.